In the fundamentals of materials and shading trailer, I had a couple shots where I transformed a clay material into finished materials to show how much of a difference shaders can make. I got a couple questions about that effect, so I wanted to share how I made it. Of course, there's a million different ways of doing the same thing, but here's at least one way, and it's really fast. So first, once you already have all of your materials set up, which by the way, this is from the exercise in the course, is to go through and add materials to all of these different objects. So I won't show you how I did that because that of course would take away all the fun. I will say though that this is tiled very obviously, but when you zoom in here and you have a bunch of papers and stuff covering the desk, you can barely see the pattern anyway. It actually works really well. But now on to the effect. So let's say we want to do this for the desk first. Well, the first step is to make a gradient texture that just kind of divides this between its normal material and a clay material. So let's mix two shaders together, Shift A shader and mix shader, and mix this just with another principled BSDF. I'll take this one, just hit Shift D to duplicate it and plug it in. So whenever this mix factor is set to 1, it'll just be that clay material. I'll make sure it's not very reflective, the roughness is up, clear coat is down, and yeah, that'll work. Okay, so now we just need to mix this based on a gradient. So let's do that with Shift A, texture, and a gradient texture. We didn't talk about textures much in the course because of course we'll cover that in a later texturing course, and so we'll get to spend a lot more time on them in a bit. But for now, let's grab a gradient texture and just plug the factor right into here. And you can see it blends between one and the next. Now we want to have more precise control over exactly where this gradient is starting and ending. So let's add a texture setup by just pressing Ctrl T over the gradient texture. And since we have Node Wrangler enabled, that'll add the texture coordinate and the mapping node for us. So we could go ahead and rotate this into place by rotating this along the Z axis and then transforming it from there. But what I would actually really like to do is make sure that this works for all objects. And if I did it this way, then all objects would, let's say if I rotated this -90 degrees, pretty much every object that has this, it would start on the right and end on the left, and it would just go through the bounding box of the objects at the same time. But really I want this to happen in world space. You can see if we apply this to other objects, which by the way, we can do really fast just by box selecting all of these different things and just hitting Control and G. So that's going to create a group node with just this shader input, which we can rename by hitting Tab to go out of it, and then just renaming this to Material Transform, or whatever you'd like, and just clicking the little shield icon to make sure that it's saved, even if it's not applied to any other objects. Now we can apply this to other objects too, and other materials. So let's select our chair here, Shift A, Group, and Material Transform. You can see I already made one beforehand, but let's use this one. And there we go. So we can see that this one also has a blend from the left to the right. But if I were to move this, let's say we go tab into this one, tab into the group node, and now it's going to apply to both at the same time. If I take this location and move it back, you can see that the point of transformation is going to be different across the desk and the chair. Really, I want it to be in the exact same spot in world space. So instead of using generated coordinates or object coordinates, I'm actually going to use object coordinates from a third object, which is this empty here. So I've already animated an empty just moving across the screen. On frame 0, it starts over on one side, and then it continues and goes to the other side of the screen. You can see it's rotated a little bit as well to come in at an angle. So instead of using this mapping node, which I can get rid of just by hitting Control and X, then I can select this empty either with the eyedropper tool or just bringing up the name empty. You can see I haven't named it very well. Let's go ahead and rename that to Material Transform Gradient. Select that desk, and there we go. Now we just need to plug the object coordinates into the gradient texture, wait for it to reload, and now wherever this empty is going to define where this texture shows up. So as we scrub towards 0 and up towards 1, you can see it smoothly transitioning across all of the objects. I'll go ahead and quickly apply this Material Transform node to all of the other materials here as well, at least the couple materials that are in local view here. I won't go through every single object here because that takes a little while. So I'll select the computer, group, Material Transform, plug that right in. You don't need to do anything special, just select the material, Shift A, Group, Material Transform, and just drag and drop it right on. So now it works for all of the different objects. The only thing we need to do here is just add a little bit of noise to make this a bit more interesting. So I'll hit Tab to enter the group node here and add some noise, Shift A, texture and noise like so. And to have this sort of eat away at the gradient, I'm going to use the overlay blend mode. So Shift A, color, and mix RGB to mix these two together. We can hold Control and Shift to see exactly what this noise texture looks like. And we'll probably want to give it the same coordinates as the empty. So let's plug the coordinates into the noise texture here as well. That way the noise will move along with the empty. If you don't want that, then you can just hit Shift D here and remove the object and plug in the regular object coordinates like so. Okay, so now let's take the color and mix node and switch this over to overlay. What that's going to do is multiply the dark parts and then screen the light parts together. And set this to 1. And that way it appears to be kind of eating away at the gradient. So you can change the settings here if you'd like. I think I had a scale of somewhere around 3. A lot of detail. And a bit of roughness. That way the lumps are pretty big overall, but still have a lot of fine-tuned detail. Okay, I do think I want the noise to move along with the empty though, so I'm going to plug this back in. I just wanted to show you how you could undo that if you wanted to. But now this is also going to move with the gradient. It looks kind of cool as it's flowing over the different objects. But I'd like it to be a little more contrasted. I don't want it to be quite so even of a blend. So I'll just use a color ramp node. Shift A, converter, and color ramp. I'll bring the left side over to the right a little bit. And the right side over to the left to squish this together. You could also use a map range node to get the same effect, but the cool thing with this is you can add extra steps in between, go up and then back down, or whatever else you want to do. So maybe it has like an initial wave here at about 0.5, goes back down to like 0.1, then goes up to 1. So you can do all sorts of crazy different patterns like that, and that just helps it be a little bit more interesting. The last thing I think I want to do is animate this a little bit so it's not quite so static as the pattern moves along the different objects. So lastly, I'll just go to the noise texture here and switch it from 3D to 4D. That way I can kind of warp it along the W. On frame 1, I'll hit I to insert a keyframe for 0. And then on the last frame over here, I'll set it to 0.2. I don't really know how fast this goes exactly. I'll insert a keyframe for that, but then I'll just see how that works. Play it back, and if it needs to be faster or slower, then we can definitely do that. I think it should be a little bit faster. So let's go ahead and set that up to 0.5, insert another keyframe, and give that a try. There we go, that looks much better. And then lastly, for any of the animations, I don't really want it to ease in and out, so I'll just select the keyframes down here by pressing A, and then V to switch the handle type and switch that to vector. So now there's no ease in and ease out. It'll just change at a constant speed. So that's the effect. Super simple. I hope it gives you some cool ideas to make some awesome different transformations of your own. And I hope you enjoyed the Fundamentals of Materials and Shading course.